Rain streaked down the tinted windshield as Roman Kade killed the engine of his black vintage coupe and stared at the tiny cafe across the street like it held the answers to a life he didn't even know he wanted. He hadn't planned on stopping. Not here. Not in this sleepy Oregon town with its fog-draped hills and pine-lined streets. But after walking away from the cameras, the interviews, the luxury parties in LA, and the endless expectations attached to his name, he'd craved silence. Real silence.
No flashing lights. No fake smiles.
Just a decent coffee, and somewhere no one knew who the hell he was. He tugged his hoodie lower over his face, stepped into the rain, and headed for the warm glow of the cafe. The bell over the door chimed as he stepped inside. The smell hit him, first fresh cinnamon, espresso, and something sweet baking in the back. It tugged at something far away in his chest. Then he saw her. Behind the counter, wiping her flour-dusted hands on a towel, stood a woman with soft waves of dark hair pulled into a messy braid, a faded band tee under a flour-stained apron, and eyes the color of stormy skies. She looked up, caught him staring, and raised an eyebrow. "You lost?" she asked, voice light but direct. Roman blinked.
No.
Just coffee. Her eyes narrowed slightly, amused. "We do that here. Lucky for you." He stepped forward, the tension in his shoulders easing. "You own this place?" "I do." She poured a fresh cup without asking what he wanted. "Black. You look like the type." He took the mug from her, a small smile twitching at the corner of his mouth. "I'm Roman." She hesitated. "Nova. Cool name." "Thanks. Yours a little dramatic." He almost laughed. No one had spoken to him like that in years. Not since before the money. Before his face was on magazines and Forbes lists. He sipped the coffee. It was perfect. "You're not from around here," she said, leaning her arms on the counter. "What gave it away?"
Nova shujejet.
"You've got that look." "What look?" "I have a secret, and I don't want anyone to know, but I kind of do look." That made him laugh, really laugh, and Nova's expression softened. She tilted her head, studying him. He looked around the place. Cozy, worn-wood floors, mismatched chairs, shelves lined with old books and local art. It was warm.
Real.
"How long have you had this place?" he asked. "For years. Bought it with everything I had and a loan that gave me ulcers. But it's mine." Roman nodded, something tightening in his chest. "I get that." "Oh yeah?" she asked, not mocking, just curious. He looked down into his cup, then up at her again. "I used to run a company. Tech apps. A lot of late nights, a lot of press." Nova leaned in, intrigued. "Used to?" "I left. Walked away." "Why?" He hesitated. It stopped feeling like mine. Something about the way she was looking at him made him want to say more, but Nova just nodded like she understood. A man called from the back. "Nova, the cinnamon rolls are ready." "Be right there," she shouted, before looking at him again. "You hungry?" He hadn't realized until she asked, but yeah.
Starving.
"Yeah," he said. She handed him a plate without asking for money. "On the house. You look like you needed to find this place today." He looked down at the warm roll, then back at her. "Thank you." She smiled, then turned and disappeared into the kitchen. Roman sat at the window, watching the rain, sipping perfect coffee, and eating something that tasted like childhood. He didn't know what had just happened, but he knew he wasn't leaving this town anytime soon. And he sure as hell wasn't done talking to Nova. The next morning he was back.
He didn't know why.
He told himself it was because he liked the coffee, but he knew it wasn't true. Nova was wearing a different shirt, her braid looser than yesterday, her hands already dusted in flour. "You again," she said, but there was a smile in her voice this time. "I'm starting to think this is the best coffee in the country," he said. "Flattery gets you nothing." "I was hoping for another cinnamon roll." She shook her head, laughing.
"Fine.
But you're paying this time." He reached for his wallet. No cash, she said quickly, tossing him a square reader. Swipe. His eyes flicked up. You don't trust me? I don't trust anyone who won't tell me what company they used to run. Roman froze slightly. Nova noticed. I Googled you last night, she admitted. Don't act surprised. He sighed, sliding his card. Didn't expect to be recognized here. You're not that hidden, she said. Roman Kade, creator of Glimpse, millionaire tech prodigy, walked away from it all 2 months ago. No one knows why. He ran a hand through his damp hair. Guess I'm not as invisible as I thought. Nova handed him the roll. You're not invisible, just out of place. He tilted his head. Does that bother you? Not yet, she said, challenging. Roman sat down again, this time at the counter. You ever think about leaving? He asked. Nova wiped down the surface. I already did. I was in LA for years. Tried to make something of myself. Got tired of chasing things that didn't want me back. He looked at her, really looked. You came back home. Yeah. Open this place. Started over. They weren't that different, he realized. He came back again the next day. And the next. She'd tease him. He'd ask her questions. Their conversations got longer. Their silences got more comfortable. He watched her laugh with customers, knead dough with her whole body, and hum softly when she thought no one was listening. He started to feel normal again. Real. And then one night, after she locked up, she turned to him and said, You ever think some places find us, not the other way around? He nodded. Yeah. She hesitated. You ever think people do too? He looked at her. Really looked. And for the first time in a long time, Roman Kade didn't feel lost. Roman leaned against the polished oak counter, watching Nova tuck a strand of hair behind her ear as she scribbled something into a worn notebook. The café was quieter than usual, soft jazz humming from the speaker overhead, the last customer having left 10 minutes ago. Outside, the sky glowed a dusky blue, hinting at the edge of evening. What's that? He asked, nodding toward the notebook. She didn't look up. Inventory. I do it myself, every Sunday. Keeps me from overspending on things I don't need. Like 12 jars of imported honey? That was one time, she replied, finally glancing at him, eyes sharp. And it was on sale. Roman chuckled. I'm not judging. I once spent $20,000 on a digital art piece I never even hung. Nova arched an eyebrow. Let me guess. It was supposed to be an investment. No, I was trying to impress a woman who ghosted me 2 days later. She closed the notebook and leaned on her elbows. Sounds like you had a lot of practice being someone you weren't. He looked down at the counter, tracing a knot in the wood with his thumb. Yeah, I did. The silence stretched, not uncomfortable but reflective. Then she asked, What made you finally stop pretending? Roman hesitated. I had this moment. I was at a launch party for our newest app, surrounded by champagne and influencers. And I realized I didn't know half the people there. I didn't recognize the version of me they were celebrating. It was like watching my life happen to someone else. Nova nodded slowly. That sounds lonely. It was. Her gaze drifted to the window. Most people wouldn't walk away from all that. I didn't walk, he said quietly. I ran. She didn't press further, didn't ask for details. Instead, she straightened and said, Come on. I need help carrying something from the storeroom. He followed her through a narrow hallway into a back room filled with stacked boxes and the faint scent of vanilla and cardboard. She pointed to a crate of ceramic mugs. Those go under the shelf by the register. Roman crouched and lifted the box, careful not to drop it. You know, I've never worked in a cafe before. You're not working, she said, walking ahead of him. You're helping. There's a difference. They returned to the front, and he slid the box into place. She knelt beside him, organizing the mugs, her shoulder brushing his. You always do everything yourself? He asked. I don't like depending on people. Her tone was quiet but firm. I've done that before. It didn't end well. Roman didn't respond right away. He hurt you.
She paused, then stood. No.
He just disappeared when things got hard. Roman rose too, meeting her eyes. And you stayed. I had no choice. He nodded, respecting the boundaries she'd drawn. Well, for what it's worth, I'm not going anywhere. Nova gave him a long, unreadable look before turning away. There's leftover pasta in the fridge. You hungry? They ate in the back office, cramped between filing cabinets and an old bulletin board covered in faded photographs. Nova sat cross-legged on the floor, her plate balanced on a stack of catering menus. Roman leaned against the desk, twirling spaghetti on a plastic fork. You know, she said, pointing at his plate, you twirl like someone who's never cooked for himself. I had a private chef for 5 years, he said. Does that count? Nova laughed. Not in this town, it doesn't. He watched her for a moment, the way she ate with no pretense, no performance. Just real and present. You ever think about expanding? Opening a second location? She shook her head. I'd have to hire people I don't trust. Give up control. That's not my thing. I built this place with my hands. Every crack in that wall, every squeaky floorboard, those are mine. That's kind of beautiful. Nova glanced at him, her expression softening. I guess I just like knowing I can rely on something, even if it's just bricks and coffee beans. Roman tilted his head. What if you could rely on more than that? Nova's fork paused midair. Like what? Someone who doesn't disappear when it gets hard.
The air changed.
She set her plate down. You don't know me well enough to say that. Maybe not, he said, but I want to. For a moment, she didn't move. Then she stood, gathering their plates. You should go. It's late. He stood too, not pushing. Okay. She walked him to the door, her hands on the frame as she leaned against it. I'll be back tomorrow, he said. She didn't answer right away. Then softly, I know. He stepped out into the cool air, the door clicking shut behind him. Back in his rented house on the edge of town, Roman lay awake staring at the ceiling. He hadn't planned on staying another week, much less another night. But he couldn't shake the way Nova had looked at him, guarded, but not closed. Hopeful, even if she didn't want to be. He opened his phone, scrolled past a dozen unopened messages from his former assistant, and deleted them all. Then, without second-guessing, he opened a new note and began typing. Business proposal, local café investment. Potential partnership. He paused, then added, or maybe something more. He saved the note and turned off the phone. He wasn't just running anymore. He was heading somewhere. And her name was Nova. Roman didn't come by the café the next morning. Nova noticed. She told herself not to. She filled the pastry case like always, adjusted the window display, and made cappuccinos for her regulars with the same practiced rhythm she'd built over years. But every time the door opened, her eyes flicked up with the smallest, involuntary hope. By noon, the pit in her stomach had started to gnaw. He said he'd be back. She shook it off. People said things all the time. Promises were air. Words, easily tossed around. She'd learned that the hard way. But she still left his favorite stool at the counter empty. By late afternoon, she gave up pretending she wasn't bothered. She took a break in the back office and opened her laptop to check the local news, tell herself she wasn't checking for him. But there he was. Not in the news, on the cafe's security cams still open from the night before. She watched the grainy footage on loop, him leaning against the doorframe, her standing too close. The way he'd looked at her right before he left. She closed the laptop hard, stood, and went back to work. He came in the next night. It was just after closing. The lights dimmed, chairs already flipped onto tables. She was locking up when the bell jingled, and he stepped inside, rain clinging to his jacket, hair damp, eyes searching. I thought you got tired of cinnamon rolls, she said, not moving from the door. I was in Portland, he said, meeting with a lawyer. She folded her arms. You could have said something. I didn't think you'd care if I was gone a day. She let out a quiet breath, barely audible. I didn't say I did. He stepped forward slowly. But you did. Nova turned and walked to the counter. What lawyer? I'm buying a property here, he said. A house on the ridge. It's small, needs work, but it's real. She looked up sharply. Why? Because I'm not leaving. He slid his hands into his pockets. Not unless you tell me to. Nova studied him, her gaze unreadable. This isn't a retreat, Roman. People live real lives here. They don't hide behind startups and private jets. I'm not hiding, he said. I'm changing. You expect me to believe that after 2 weeks? No, he said. I don't expect you to do anything except keep being the only person who's ever looked at me without seeing dollar signs. She held his gaze. I don't want a project. I don't want someone trying to prove something. I'm not trying to prove anything, he said. I'm just trying to be here. With you. Nova turned away, wiped her hands on a towel that didn't need cleaning. You're good at talking. I'm better at showing. She looked back at him. Then show me. He didn't hesitate. Come with me. To where? Just come. She hesitated, then grabbed her coat from the back hook. She didn't say goodbye to the café, she'd be back in the morning. But something told her this night might change everything. They drove in silence, the road winding into the hills. When he stopped the car, they stepped out into cool night air, wind tugging at her sleeves. The house was barely more than a frame, windows boarded, porch lopsided, roof half redone. But the view. Nova turned slowly, taking it in. The town below shimmered with warm lights, the river curling through the trees, the café just a speck near the center. Above them, the stars stretched wide and clear. I'm going to rebuild it, he said from beside her. Not hire someone. Me. She turned to him. You know how to do that? No, he said. But I want to learn. She looked at the house again, then back to him. Why this place? Because it's the only place I've ever felt like I could start over. And the only person I want to do that with is standing right in front of me. Nova's breath caught, but she masked it with a blink. You're serious? I've never been more. She stepped closer, the wind shifting her hair across her cheek. You don't even know all of me. Then tell me, he said. Let me stay long enough to learn. Her voice dropped. The last man who said something like that left me with debt, a broken lease, and 3 months of empty promises. I'm not him. Everyone says that. I'll prove it. She studied him long and hard, then finally said, If you run, I won't come looking. I won't. She nodded once. All right. Then we start here. Roman reached for her hand, not fast, not greedy, just steady. She let him. They stood in front of the broken house, fingers entwined, the town glowing behind them. He wasn't Roman Kade, tech mogul, millionaire, ghost of a life too fast and too bright. Not here. Here, he was a man building something from nothing with her. The hammer slipped and caught Roman just below the knuckle. Damn it, he muttered under his breath, jerking his hand back. Let me see, Nova said, already crossing the unfinished porch with a small first aid kit in hand. Her jeans were streaked with sawdust, and her shirt stuck to her back with sweat. The late spring sun had baked the ridge all afternoon, and neither of them had taken a break in hours. It's nothing, Roman replied, flexing his fingers. Stop acting like you're made of steel, she said, tugging his hand gently into hers. You're not. He let her clean the scrape in silence. They hadn't spoken much since the morning, both too focused on measuring, cutting, and swearing at the warped boards that refused to sit flush. When she was done, she didn't let go right away. You're better at this than I expected, she said, taping gauze over the wound. Even with the swearing. I learned fast. You're relentless. Roman looked down at her. You make me want to be. Nova dropped his hand. Don't say that like it's a compliment. It is, he said. You're the first person who's ever expected more from me than a press release. She stepped back, brushing her palms against her thighs. You used to run a company. You built something huge. Don't pretend like no one ever expected anything from you. But they didn't expect me, he said. They expected the version they built in their heads. The one who'd never say no, never slow down, never ask why. Nova turned away, her gaze sweeping over the bare beams of the house slowly coming together. And what do you want now? Roman moved beside her. I want to build something I don't need to walk away from. She didn't respond, but her fingers twitched at her side. I signed the deed yesterday, he added. It's officially mine now. Nova's eyes flicked to him. You didn't mention that. I wanted to show you like this. With a house halfway up, not just a signature. She nodded once, then added, You're serious about staying? I already stayed. They stood in silence, the wind rustling through the pine trees behind them. Then Nova said, The town council's been asking if I'd apply for the empty space across from the bookstore. They want a second location, a bakery, not a café. Something more focused. Roman looked at her, surprised. You never mentioned that. I wasn't sure I wanted it. I didn't think I could handle more than what I had. And now. She met his eyes. Now I think I might want something bigger. But not if it costs me everything. It doesn't have to, he said. You're not doing it alone. She let out a breath. You think money fixes everything? No, he said. But partnership does. And I have more than enough of both to offer. Nova crossed her arms. You'd invest in me? I'd invest in what we're building. You, me, this town. All of it. She studied him, and for the first time, she didn't look away. If I say yes, I don't want strings. I don't want to owe you. You won't, Roman said. You'll own it outright. I'm just the silent partner. With the occasional hammer and a busted knuckle. Nova laughed before she could stop herself. The sound was short, but it cracked something open between them. I've never had anyone back me without trying to take control, she admitted. Not once. You still don't, he said. This is your world. I'm just showing up for it. Her eyes softened, and she nodded. All right. Let's do it. Roman's chest tightened, but this time, it wasn't anxiety. It was something deeper. Something permanent. 2 weeks later, the town buzzed with news of the expansion. Nova's name was on every form, every permit, every lease. Roman's wasn't. Just as he promised. He stayed out of the spotlight, no interviews, no press. Just late nights with Nova, painting walls, kneading dough, and testing recipes until sunrise with flour in their hair and music humming softly from her phone. One night, as they finished hanging the final light fixture in the new bakery, Nova turned to him in the soft glow. There's something I need to ask, she said. Roman set the drill down. Anything. Why me? Her voice was quiet. You could have gone anywhere, done anything, been with anyone. You were the only one who didn't try to fix me, he said. You just saw me. And that made me want to be better. Nova stared at him, the question lingering on her lips. Roman stepped closer. I love you. She blinked once, then said, I know. He tilted his head, a small grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. You gonna say it back? She reached up and looped her arms around his neck. I love you, Roman Kade, even when you leave sawdust everywhere. He kissed her then, slow and certain, surrounded by shelves of fresh bread and pastries waiting for morning. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't public. But it was real. The next weekend, the grand opening drew the entire town. People lined the sidewalk before dawn. Roman stayed behind the counter, apron on, sleeves rolled up, handing out croissants and pouring espresso like he'd been doing it his whole life. Nova moved beside him, completely in her element. Confident, radiant. At noon, the mayor stopped by, shook their hands, and called them the new heart of the rich. Later, as the last customer drifted out and the applause faded, Roman pulled Nova toward the window, where the sunlight bathed the storefront in gold. "You happy?" he asked. She leaned into him. For the first time in a long time. He kissed her temple. "Then I'm exactly where I'm meant to be." And as the town bustled around them, the café lights glowed behind them, and the house on the ridge stood tall in the distance, Roman knew he hadn't just fled the spotlight. He had finally stepped into the life he was always meant to live. With her. Nova stood at the edge of the community garden, hands on her hips as she stared down the stubborn patch of overgrown weeds. The town had asked her to help bring it back to life, and somehow she'd said yes probably, because Roman had nudged her elbow during the meeting and whispered, "You're already running half the town. May as well make it official." That man had a way of making the impossible sound like an adventure. Behind her, she heard his footsteps crunch over gravel. She didn't turn. "If you're here to supervise, you're late. And unpaid." "I'm not here to supervise," Roman said, dropping a pair of gloves beside her. "I'm here to get my hands dirty." She glanced at him sideways. He wore an old t-shirt and jeans with a rip at the knee, no trace of the man who used to wear suits tailored tighter than his patients. His hair had grown slightly longer, curling at the edges when it rained. He looked relaxed, settled, like the version of him he'd fought to become. Nova bent down and pulled at a thick root. "They're hosting the Harvest Festival here this year. Did you know that?" He knelt beside her, tugging at another section. "I heard. And apparently, we're sponsoring it." "We are."
Yeah.
"I signed us up for the pie contest. Under your name." She paused mid-pull. "You what?" "You're going to win. I've had your apple cranberry. It's basically a weaponized dessert." Nova shook her head, but he caught the way her mouth twitched. "And what exactly are you contributing to this festival?" "I'm building the stage." She looked over at him, stunned. "Roman, that's not a folding table. That's carpentry." "I've been watching videos," he said. "Also, I may have recruited half the hardware store staff." Nova laughed, low and surprised. "You're impossible. You love me anyway." She didn't deny it. Later that night, candles danced along the edge of the porch railing outside the house on the ridge. The bones of the place had transformed walls painted in warm earth tones, wide windows that opened to the valley below, a porch swing that creaked softly in the breeze. Roman had built it all with his own hands, sometimes clumsily, always determined. Nova leaned against the doorframe, holding 2 glasses of red wine. "You promised we'd take a night off. This counts, right?" Roman took a glass from her and clinked it gently against hers. "We worked on a garden." "That's practically a spa day, isn't it?" She settled beside him on the swing, their shoulders touching. The stars stretched wide above them, the night clear and quiet. "I've been thinking," she said, voice low, "about the bakery, about how it started." Roman turned slightly, listening. "I was desperate when I came back here," she admitted. "I poured everything into that place because I had nothing else. No backup plan. No one to fall back on." "You have someone now." "I know," she said. "But it's more than that. For the first time, I'm not just surviving. I'm choosing this. All of it." He reached over and took her hand. "So am I." She looked down at their joined fingers, then up at him. "You gave up a lot to be here." "I didn't give up anything," he said. "I traded noise for peace, pressure for purpose. And I got you. That's not a loss." Nova leaned her head on his shoulder. "You know, some days I wake up and think this is all going to disappear. Like I dreamed it, and I'll open my eyes back in that shoebox apartment in LA, burnt coffee, and a bank account hanging by threads." He kissed the top of her head. It's real. I'm real. And I'm not going anywhere. I believe you. They stayed like that for a long time, swaying gently, the night cool against their skin. Weeks passed, and the festival arrived. The garden bloomed with color. The stage stood solid and proud, and the scent of cinnamon and roasted corn filled the air. Children ran through hay bales, couples danced barefoot under string lights, and Nova's pie won first place, though she insisted the judging was rigged. As the sun dipped below the hills, Roman pulled her onto the stage he'd built with splinters and stubbornness. The music quieted as he took the microphone, clearing his throat. I wasn't planning on speaking, he began, because I've learned that sometimes it's better to show up than to speak up. But I have something to say. Nova, standing at the edge of the crowd, froze. I came here lost. I didn't even know how lost until I walked into a café and met a woman who handed me coffee like it was salvation. She didn't care about my name or my past. She just saw me. And because of her, I started to see myself again. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, but Roman's eyes stayed locked on Nova. I built a house here. I helped build a bakery. But none of it means anything without her. So I have a question. He stepped down from the stage and crossed to her, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Her breath caught as he dropped to one knee. I don't need big cities or headlines. I just need mornings that start with you and nights that end on that porch. Nova Claire Bishop, will you marry me? Silence held for a single heartbeat before she moved forward, hands shaking, eyes bright with tears. Of course I will, she whispered, pulling him to his feet and into her arms. The crowd erupted in applause, but all Nova heard was the sound of his heart beneath her ear. Months later, the wedding was held in the garden they'd restored together. Close friends, neighbors, and half the town squeezed into the space, strung with wildflowers and laughter. Nova wore a simple dress, delicate lace at the sleeves, her braid woven with tiny blossoms. Roman stood at the altar in a shirt he'd ironed himself, his tie slightly crooked. There were no photographers, no press. Just vows spoken under a clear sky, promises built on something stronger than ambition, trust, honesty, and choice. After the ceremony, they danced barefoot beneath fairy lights, and Nova whispered into his ear, "You still owe me a honeymoon." Roman grinned. "I bought a cabin near the coast. No signal, no schedule, just us." "Perfect," she said. And it was. They returned to the ridge after a week of ocean breezes and stolen kisses, back to their home and their life. Nova opened a third location the following year, this one in a neighboring town, with Roman handling the books and supervising renovations while pretending he didn't love taste testing every new recipe. They never stopped building. Not just homes or businesses, but a life designed from the ground up, flawed, beautiful, and entirely theirs. And in the quiet moments, when the world seemed too still or too loud, Roman would reach for Nova's hand, and she'd squeeze gently, reminding him of the only thing that ever really mattered. They had chosen each other, and they always would.